You're listening to Robin Flan's Drummer Interviews, the number one drum radio show in all of Los Angeles,
the world, the galaxy.
Hi, this is Robin Flans with Robin Flans Drummer Interviews, and I am here with my co-host and producer, Ed Eblin.
Welcome, everybody.
And today's guest is an extraordinary contributor to our drum industry, and he just so happens to be not only phenomenal in that aspect, but one of the kindest people on the face of the earth. And anybody who has had the opportunity to get to know John Good, the artiste, and what they call the wood whisperer at Drum Workshop, knows that I am absolutely spot on. So, with that said, I am going to bring on the master, who I absolutely adore and have known for a very long time, whose kindness has not escaped me. John, are you there?
I'm here, Robin. I don't know if I could ever live up to that intro.
You have already lived up to it, my friend.
I'm just a drum builder in Oxnard.
No, not so. So let's talk about before Oxnard. I want to talk about actually life before DW. I mean, you were only 17 when you met Don.
Yeah, I was a 17-year-old. Really bad drummer. And I wanted to try and be a better drummer. And the thing about, I was living in Malibu, and I had just come from Europe because I went to school in Europe in Lugano, Switzerland. And I saw a little tiny brand new thing in the Yellow Pages that said Drum Workshop. And I thought, wow, that looks interesting. I don't know why, but there were other bigger places like West LA Music and so on and so forth. So I gave it a call, and this guy, Don Lombardi, answers the phone. And he says, come on down, and I want to just see how you play, and then we'll take it from there. So I went down to go visit Don Lombardi, and here I'm 17 years old. And he says, sit down and show me what you got. So, of course, I showed him all of my horrible bad habits of playing. And he just kind of waved me off. He says, boy, we've got to start from the beginning here with you.
Wait a minute. So where had you developed these bad habits? I
was self-taught.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I was self-taught, and I'd been playing in little rock and roll bands, and, just garage-style stuff. And I really got frustrated with how I'd hit a wall with my abilities, and I wanted to try and be better. So I'm going to make that long story short. He started teaching me, and he would show me how to know we're going to turn the stick over, we're going to hold everything, you're going to loosen up, you're going to play this way, and then he'd say, I want you to play on this pad and go away for a week and come back and show me what you've practiced. Well, I said, a pad? A rubber pad? I want to play rock and roll. I don't want to play on a rubber pad, and so I'd go away, come back a week later, not having, rehearsed or practiced hardly at all.
Oh, gosh.
And he'd say, okay, come on, let's try this again. And he was very patient with me, and we'd go over everything he told me the week before. And I'd go away for a week on this bloody rubber pad. And I'd come back, it was all the same problems. This went on for about 2 months. And finally, one day I came in, and Don, who was not a tremendously touchy-feely kind of guy, he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, and he was staring off, out the window. And so now I'm standing next to him, and I'm staring out the window, and he goes, John, I've had all of these tremendous students that have gone on to recording careers, touring, Broadway, television, and I'm afraid you're not going to be one of those guys. And And he says, you're basically unteachable. I said,
my
God!
God!
I don't want to practice. I want to play.
Unteachable, even. Oh, yay.
So that's kind of how it all got rolling with Don. And of course, we would spend a lot of our time talking about things that were kind of hard to understand or wrong in the industry, And so we would talk about, gosh, I think we could do this better if we could just do this ourselves, like, looking at a drum set or a cymbal stand. So anyway, the one thing led to another over a lot of period of time, and we had this little tiny 400 square foot shop, and I started making stuff because I wasn't going to be a very good drummer, and Don would go play in the clubs at night to support, our little shop we had, and I would make drum seats. That was our first product, and we were kind of successful with that. I mean, we could make 1 or 2 a week, and Don was teaching Tom Beckman's kids from Beckman Musical Instruments, and they had Roland, and they also had Camco, and so Tom, he was a good guy. He says, you know what? I think a keyboard player could use this kind of seat you're making here. It adjusts up and down, and you can take the top off and put things inside.
Wow.
We called it the adjustable trap case seat.
Wow.
And so Tom says, yeah, I'll take 100.
Wow.
100.
Whoa.
We looked at each other. We're going to be rich, but then the problem was we couldn't. Where do you make 100 and 400 square feet?
How are you going to produce that?
Yeah, how are we going to do it?
That's
so
50
one
weeks of
thing
labor.
led to another. I'm sorry?
No, I said that's 50 weeks of labor if you're doing 2 a week.
Exactly. But we finally did get through all of them, and and that's where things in our manufacturing lives kind of started to come together. And boy, that was a long time ago. And then we moved into, another place, a little bit bigger place, and we were going to have a rehearsal room. We were going to have, a storefront and all kinds of stuff. And then we found out that we couldn't do that kind of business in the place that we had fixed all up, and so we never actually opened up there. Then we moved into a garage in Gardena. We moved from the garage in Gardena, which was a little depressing, by the way, into our first shop in Gardena, California, and that was a little tiny place. It was maybe 1,000 square feet.
Wow.
And we started, and at that time is when we got serious with Tom Beckman, who wanted to sell the Camco company, L.A. Camco.
Right.
And so Don and a guy named Paul Riel and myself, we got everything in the world together, got an SBA loan.
Wow.
And we handed over a check to Tom Beckman, and he gave us the keys to this, to this company called Camco. We didn't buy the name Camco, but we bought the molds and dies and such.
Right.
And what that meant to him, that check we gave him was a new Mercedes-Benz, which he drove away and never saw him again. But that's how we started to slowly get things, and what we were really into was making the 5,000 bass drum pedal, which was a Camco thing, and it had some inherent problems. It was a great feeling pedal, but I don't know if you remember, Ed, but the footboard would hit the toe clamp screw underneath it.
Yes, right.
And I found myself telling people that would go, "What's that?" And I said, "It just makes your bass drum sound with a little more tact."
Now that's marketing.
So, that's marketing already. So then we basically wound up fixing all those things, and we really got heavy into the making of bass drum pedals. That was really more our first thing. So we were off and running to the races as a hardware company.
Wow.
John, just as an insert to that toe clamp thing, I mean the wing nut on the bottom of it, you were the first company maybe to put that off to the side to offset it to the right side, I believe?
You know, Ed, I'm not certain that we were the first, but we really put a lot of design and feature into moving it away. But it was primarily because of that problem.
Right.
You're right. Most of the bass drum pedals of that earlier time did have it right underneath the footboard, and it was a chronic problem with a lot of pedals. But there were other pedals that had the side attention design. But you know, that there was a lot of big ground to break there. You know, getting into the chain and sprocket thing was huge.
Yeah.
Remember that?
I sure do.
Mm-hmm.
The chain, the sprocket.
So, I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying I remember that when they really started to hit the market, the chain drive pedals and the
it was
sprockets.
huge. It was very, very big. And there was a guy, Frank Ippolito in New York, had Pro Percussion Drum Shop, I think it was called.
Yeah.
And you remember that?
Uh-huh.
And he had a guy who worked for him named Al Duffy. And Al Duffy used to repair timpanis. And they'd order our pedals with the cam casting on it and the nylon strap. And he would take that, since he was like looking at a sprocket and a footboard under a timpani all day, he kind of put the two together, and he became the father of that whole design. And what they would do is throw away our cam casting, and they'd put this round-hole sprocket over a hex shaft and then pin it on.
Whoa.
And make the chain thing happen. So
Leslie,
Don and I said, you know, we could probably do that in a better fashion by broaching the same shaped hole and fitting it over a shaft and doing it here, you know. So eventually we bought Al Duffy's side of the patent on that, and voila, that was our foray into the chain and sprocket pedal.
Wow.
And Al Duffy, by the way, later on became plant manager at Pearl Drums.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And so and then you started working on, I mean, you really got into the edges of drums, the bearing edges and etc. I mean, is that how it went from there?
Well, it kind of Robin, you're close. It was a deal where we were making a lot of hardware.
Right.
And I was playing around with phenolic shells, meaning we would wind paper around a mandrel and glue it and cut it, and we were going to make drums out of that stuff. When lo and behold, here came Remo Belli. He walked in and he says, you know, I'm going to do that in a very big way. I'm going to call it Acousticon. Well, we were just getting ready to soak these paper shells in a vat of phenolic, and then it was our genius idea to bake this stuff so it became hard. Little do we know, which thank God he stopped us before we went through with it, if you put phenolic anywhere near a flame, it's explosive there's no tomorrow.
God. Oh, my God.
So he may have saved Don and my life. You never know.
Wow. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Remo
so anyway,
Belli.
so he went into the business of making those kind of drums.
Okay.
And, you know, and his fantastic drum heads.
Sure.
And Don said, well, you've always wanted to fool with the same combination that Camco had in their drum shells, so I started working on snare drums. And a neighbor of mine was a guy named Joe Montanari. You remember Joe?
Oh, of course.
Sure.
Yeah, Joe's in Connecticut now. But he and I were neighbors, and my girlfriend and his wife were close, and they'd be over all the time, and we'd be playing Scrabble together, you know, and in the evening, and they would be spelling out words like barn and cat. And Joe and I were spelling out tube, lug, you know, and stuff like that. Anyway, but he and I were famous and still are very famous old friends. And he would tell me, he would show, because he was cutting a lot of edges for studio people in L.A., and he would do it with a file. Well, I had this shop now in Gardena, and I figured out how to use a router. So I started routing bearing edges, and Joe would go, you know, I just spent 45 minutes on this edge, and you did it in 60 seconds. And So we taught each other things, but I started really cutting a lot of edges for people in town, and it was great. That's where from Joe I learned a little bit about timbre, because he would tap on the side of the shell and he says, "Now listen, this shell has a very low timbre. If you hear that sound," and then he said, "But listen to this shell. It's the same configuration of shell."
Right.
But listen how much higher it is, right?
Right.
So he taught me that you would tune that lower one lower, and the one that's timbred higher would perform better at a higher tuning. So I was really intrigued by that. And that's about as far as that really went, until and my ideas come to me in the shower all the time. Yeah, I should install a shower right here in my office, but I was just taking a shower, and to this day, my wife sometimes will come and knock on the shower door and go, "What are you doing?
Are you alive?"
Because I get this idea, and I'd be standing there for, God, I don't know, 20 minutes. Anyway, so she's going, "The water bill." Anyway, so I was taking a shower all these years ago, and I said, and it just came to me that, wait a second, this whole notion of timbre, is that why some drum sets don't work and others do? And is that why this tom-tom never fit in this drum kit or whatever it might be? And so that's where that whole idea of timbre was born. And timbre matching became the mantra for most of everything that we do here at DW now, and it's a major part of our lives.
Is that where your idea for wood hunting began?
The wood hunting part really came from when I used to buy all of our shells from a company called Keller Wood Products, and I you'd buy a maple shell or whatever it might be from them, but that's what was offered, and that's what was made in Manchester, New Hampshire. And I became a very good customer of theirs. But in all my experience, I really said to myself one day, I'd like to be able to make this drum out of whatever I want it to be made out of. So I started going around to some places, and I went to a place called GL Veneer in L.A., and I got to know those guys, and I said, I want to make a shell like this. What do you think it would take? And of course, Robin, there is to this day, a manual to tell you how to make round plywood, or any of those things.
Right.
So I was looking at all these exotic woods they had, and they were telling me, well, this one came from Africa, this one comes from Australia, this one is German by design, these are Asian woods over here, and I just started to get this thing about going to these various places and finding this stuff myself. I wanted to make the drum shells myself, and I wanted to, go and find where all these exotic woods come from and what they're about and how everything works. So, when
was that? When
oh God,
when did that disease hit you?
Well, that the bug really hit me in the early '90s for that.
Okay.
Remember back in the 1900s? Anyway, but
yep, Grandpa, I remember.
So, but before I took those big steps, I started buying wood from northern Michigan, and a certain company up there took me sort of, under their wing, and it was when I flew up there to meet these people, they said they weren't very cordial. Let's put it that way. As many of the veneer people I'd met were very kind of protective of what they do.
Sure.
But I flew up there on one of those little Mosquito airlines, and I landed in Escanaba, Michigan. The guy, I step onto the tarmac, and he comes out. He goes, "You look like you must be John." And I go, "Yeah." He says, "I just want you to know that in our industry, drum is a 4-letter word."
Ooh.
I said, "Oh, glad to meet you." And that guy eventually was let go by them, and then another guy came in, and then he didn't like working with this particular company, and and I liked him, and his name is Don Sadler, and he is the guy who is a mentor to me to this day. Had him on the phone earlier today, and he's an incredible guy.
Why?
Absolutely incredible guy. He's the kind of cat that makes anything possible. If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of people will say, no, you can't do this, you can't do that.
Right.
He'd scratch his chinny chin and he'd figure it out.
Okay.
So anyway, he was one of the guys that would help me with the whole idea of what are the properties of all these different types of woods. Because when I finally did get into this drum shell making machinery, I was having plywood manufactured in L.A. by a company.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just plywood. You got long grain and short grain and 2-ply, 3-ply, what have you.
Right.
And they would press it really fast. Well, they were making coffee tables. They were making doors. They were making, desks and things of that nature, furniture stuff.
Right.
Where nobody gave a damn if the glue line was perfect.
Right.
But I do.
Right.
And so they were making plywood for me kind of not in the best way.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I decided, wait a minute, I need to get into a press myself so I can make this stuff myself, right?
Of course.
And that's Don Sadler who told me, he says, and I can hear him to this day. He says, to be able to control things, John, you've got to be able to make plywood. And making plywood is a major, major key in drum shell making. Because if I want to use cherry, if I want to use oak, birch, maple, whatever I want, the world of veneer is my garden to choose from.
Sure.
And so, it was in doing that where I started to learn about grain orientation.
Okay, you know what? We're going to stop there for a second. Remember where you are, because we're going to take a short break, because you are so exciting and excited, and there's so much I have to ask about this subject. So keep your place, and we will be right back.
Design your own drum practice pad. What would it feel like? At ePad, our EnduraFlex practice surface was perfected to eliminate extreme bounce and unrealistic rebound. The benefits of ePad include quiet playing surface and shock-resistant properties that help reduce the risk of stress-related injuries. ePad offers the perfect feel and energy return for developing speed, endurance, and control. You will meet the challenge of the weaker hand with ePad. Warm up with our knee pads, tabletop practice pads. Warming up on ePads provides a natural transition from practice pad to drum set. At ePad, we know the need for speed, control, and endurance. Get your chops together with ePad's EnduraFlex playing surface. Practicing with ePads builds your finger, wrist, and forearm strength and helps you gain better control and endurance. Into feel? Well, ePads replicate the response and feel of a real drum. Our Pro Deluxe knee pad is portable, convenient, and lightweight. Perfect for the beginner, intermediate, or pro touring drummers. Find out why our products are a must-have. ePad, your source for high-quality drum set practice pads and accessories.
Hi, this is Robin Flans from Robin Flans Drummer Interviews. Please be sure to check out robinflansdrummerinterviews.com, where you can find some of my classic interviews such as Jeff Porcaro, Vinnie Colaiuta, Ringo Starr, and Carlos Vega, and many, many more. Again, that's robinflansdrummerinterviews.com. And yes, indeed, check those out, and check out epadco.com. That's epadco.com. And also, remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel, Robin Flans Drummer Interviews at YouTube, and hit that red button. So, John, do you remember where you were? Because, you know what? I really want to talk about, you mentioned properties, different properties of wood and the sounds of different woods. Because that's, you've become this, there's this Yiddish word, it's maven. You've become the maven on woods and the sounds and, I mean, the tones of these woods. And it's just, to me, it's like astounding. So,
well, it's when you have discovery of what can be and how you can choose a different type of sound, you got to understand how to get to that sound or how to get to exploiting the properties of a certain wood. So in other words, when I'd be talking with Don Sadler and guys like that who are guiding me through this beautiful world of different veneers. When I started being able to make plywood, the two obvious outer finishes for a drum shell were the easiest things for me to find at the time were bird's eye maple and what we call curly maple. And one thing that really was the pivotal point for me was that when I would put curly maple, and what that means, everybody, is you have, let's say you're looking at a drum shell that's got horizontal grain on the outside of the shell, but you could swear there's a ribbon of corduroy going vertically up and down. That's what we call curly maple. That's what the predominant figure is. So every shell that I made with curly maple on the outside, the timbre, when you tap on the shell, the timbre of the sound was lower than all the other shells. Not just once in a while, not just accidentally. You could predict that every time. So I, of course, had to know why. And it occurred to me, yes, the grain is horizontal on the outside, but that predominant figure going vertical is the reason that it's driving the pitch down. Why would it drive the pitch down? Well, if you were to take a piece of veneer, thin, 1/36 of an inch thick, and it's horizontal, and you're holding it in the middle, just a sheet of veneer, and you bend it from either side, and somebody taps on the center of that piece of veneer, as you bend it all the way into a circle, the pitch goes up, 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 like that. And that's because there's tension. If you turn that veneer the other direction, you have the same piece that you're trying to hold in your hand, but it's got vertical veneer, or vertical grain pattern, then it'll just fold over your hand like a cloth. And why is that? Because the strength is going the other direction and there's no tension on it. So we started making some shells with a vertical veneer on the outside, and the pitch went screaming down low.
Wow.
So that's where we discovered that we live in this world that's controlled by physics. You can try and do whatever you want in this world, but none of us can get away from the properties of physics. And so we started to play with physics in that regard. And then I got the genius idea. Well, we can cut this stuff at a 45-degree angle. We can make X patterns. We can do all kinds of good stuff. And the world of timbre and being able to timbre match became a much bigger open door that we walk through. And then you can take, for example, maple has a full spectrum of frequency availability to it, where cherry has a much darker sound than that. And so, and different lengths of vibration time, meaning sustain. And you can really exploit these things by changing their grain orientations. And boy, we just went to town with that. And I'm still having a blast with all that. Robin, if this wasn't so much fun, we just wouldn't be doing it.
Now, what about these exotic woods? I mean, how do they enter into the sound picture?
Okay, a lot of people say, okay, what does ebony sound like? What's the properties of that? Well, it depends on whether it's going up and down vertical on the shell or going horizontal on the shell, because then you're dealing with the tension of the wood pattern. So, it's not so much there's certain woods that have a very influential tone, such as mahogany, and depending on which direction you run that mahogany, you can put it on the outside, you can put it on the inside, and it'll texture the warmth and the thickness of the sound and become very, very musical. And then you can also have cherry wood in the middle, or you can have maple in the middle. You don't want to put woods together that will fight each other. You don't want to put, for example, maple and birch predominantly together because, maple vibrates nice and long. Birch vibrates very fast, punchy, but a short sustain. Right, Ed? You've played birch drums before.
Yes, I have.
And so, the Japanese had a great idea, and the Yamaha company, to make recording custom drums. And they made them from birch.
Right.
Why? Because in the studio, as we all know, you sometimes don't need these very long, hanging, sounds because engineers going to ask you to tape it up or something of that nature.
Right.
So you got to use the right tool for the right job.
Right. And
so, so that's...
And that brings me to my next question. So how do you, when an artist comes in, how do you recommend to each artist the right fit for them?
Well, what I typically will do with my wonderful bunch of people that I work with is that I ask them, for example, what do you want to hear? Do you want to hear really singing toms? Do you play fusion-y kind of complicated progressive rock stuff where you're playing a lot of notes? Or are you playing great big fat hanging tom fills that encompass a lot of air and space in between? What do you want to hear? And if they say, well, I like to hear fatter, darker sounds, then I'll push them in a direction which is, materials that we would use for that, such as, like I've been talking about, cherry a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then they say, yeah, but I want the lowest of the low in that floor tom there. So then we'll talk about grain orientations and X patterns that really bring the pitch and exploit the material to do the very best it can. When the shell and the grain orientation is working together with the materials, there is just nothing you can't do. And you then have to shape and contour the bearing edges to exploit the bottom end of a very dark, masculine sound, let's say, or whatever it might be. You would fatten up the outer edge so it contacts the head a little more. And on the bottom, you might want the edge to be sharper because you want the drum to hum as long as it can. So there's a lot of different things we can do to drums, and we're not done yet, by the way. We've got a lot of things that yet to discover, but
okay, so we're gonna go down that path in a minute. But first, I have to play devil's advocate.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of drum sets in the marketplace that are very costly, and including yours.
Right.
Okay, so there's multiple theories here. There's a theory that you can give a drummer a pot and a pan. I'm oversimplifying this, but they can make great music with minute tools. So I'm not belittling your product. I'm just playing devil's advocate. So I'm asking you why, seriously, if that's one theory, why this totally makes a difference. Play along with me.
Well, I don't have to play along. Really, it's very obvious. The difference is what the music calls for. The difference is how much change is in somebody's pocket. I can get from A to B in a Ford Fiesta, or I can take a BMW and get there a lot more comfortable and a lot faster. So there's a whole gamut of reasons that you would exploit all of these sounds if you're an accomplished player or about to become one,
mm-hmm.
and you know what you want to hear.
Right.
Then it behooves you, because your drums that bloody stick in your hand playing that, it becomes an extension of yourself. And you shouldn't cheat yourself out of what your potential is by playing something that doesn't satisfy either a feeling inside of you. Before you get anybody to dance on a dance floor, you've got to feel it yourself. And rhythm is a wonderful thing, but rhythm is a tool that we use to exploit different sounds. There's all kinds of sounds available, and it's very important to me to give somebody everything that they can dream in the sound of a drum. Now, can Terry Bozzio make a Sears drum set sound fantastic? I'll bet he can. But does he have to, and should he have to? Where he's orchestral practically. He can sit there and he can drive the sound out of a drum that you just go, how in the world how did we get to that place? How do we get to that beautiful sound in the bottom end or the top end where he'll drive a kit kind of like Neil Peart does, from extreme highs to mid-range to extreme bottoms. That's music inside of rhythm. And I think it's all about what you want to hear, what you want to see, and how comfortable you want to be behind your drum set. And that's where I'm driven, is to make things easier for drummers to play, and things that make sense, things that exploit and utilize physics to the way that to its full potential to make you sound good, Mr. Drummer. And it goes all the way through drum heads and everything else that we have to deal with.
So what? So what more? I mean, besides what you're doing, I mean, what more? You just said there's more to do. What more?
Well, I'm on my journey. I for the longest time, I was on the road too. I did a lot of tech work because Don and I didn't have enough money to support ourselves. So there were times when I had to go on the road, and I would go out there, and it was, and I just leave the factory and go on a tour, and I'd find out what sets up fast, what breaks down, what literally breaks, or how you cut an edge to crack on stage and hit the back seat of Madison Square Gardens. I mean, I wanted to know all these things. It was on-the-job training is what that was. It wasn't just because I was broke. It taught me a lot of things.
Of course.
And every design that I do, Robin, is based around being able to tune a drum. Because, when you learn to play guitar, very first thing you learn, Ed, is what?
Tuning.
How to tune it, or else you've got nothing.
Right.
And so, and then unfortunately, many drummers either never get to that place, or they don't have a clear understanding of it to get to a place where you can make that drum do what its potential really is. So I spent years tuning drums in the studio, on the road for recordings. God, I worked for Frank Zappa, and he recorded absolutely everything. Well, everybody in the drum world would deal with a thread pitch going into the receiver on the drum to tune, and it was 12/24. Robin, that means 24 threads per inch, okay? And when you tune that in, it's a very coarse thread, and then you start playing, you're what? Vibrating the drum. And what a thread will do is take the least path of resistance and loosen up. So that was a constant problem for everybody. You'd look at the tension rods are lying on the floor at the end of the night, etc. And it you just can't keep drums in tune very well. Right. So in the mid '90s, I switched to what I called true pitch, which is 30 threads per inch, and that was a big bold step. And Don kind of looked at me. He said, "Are you sure you want to de-standardize the industry?" I said, "You're damn right I do, because why are we living with something that could be better, but that's the way everybody does it?"
Right.
So I've never been that guy, Rob.
Right.
So we switched to true pitch, which is 30 threads. And we went along, and it was a finer way of tuning, right?
Right.
But we still had those problems of smaller drums. I still sweat on 8s and 10s. I hate them because they intimidate me. So I bit the bullet. Now, listen to this one. I bit the bullet a couple of years ago. And on my upper end drum kits, that's the Collector's Series drums, we went to true pitch 50.
Wow.
50 threads per inch.
Wow.
And you want to talk about being able to dial in a sound, to use the timbre of the shell and really find it instead of just turning it right past the quarter tones, semitones, and, skipping where the sweet spot is of the drum is. No, you find it. And once you get it, you're engaging 50 threads. It stays there. Sure, drum heads wear and stretch a little bit, but you're eliminating a few of the things that plague your ability to tune the drum.
Right.
And so this is something that's a place we've gone.
Right.
And I'm very, very proud of that.
Right.
Of course, you got the guy out there who says, "God, John, it took me forever to change heads." Well, I'm real sorry, pal. Use a power tool.
Oh, there's always one in every crowd.
There's a guy out there everywhere. It's probably a guy listening to us right now.
Yeah.
I hate that True Pitch 50. Believe me, it's good for you.
On that note, we're going to take another really quick. We're not going to take.
I only thought we had. I'm enjoying this. I want to keep listening.
Okay, well then forget it. We're not gonna take another break. We're just gonna sail right on through. So,
well, how do you pay the bills, Robin?
Oh, there are no bills, John. We're just floating in it.
What a beautiful world you live in. There are no bills.
Oh boy, do we live in it.
We've got threads that don't even connect over here.
So you know what? I want to ask you about your snare drum collection that you introduced a couple of years ago.
You mean the Icon snares?
Yes.
Well, that became. I built a snare drum. We have time for this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I built the first one I did. I met these guys in Indiana, and they work for a company that handles the interior of aircraft, and I'm talking inlaid wood, right? And they'll build the inside of a 747 for Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah, whatever his name might be, and the word budget is never part of their vocabulary.
Oh, they must live in a nice world too.
They live in a nice world, but I don't live in that world.
Yeah.
And so, just so happens these guys are drummers. So they fell in love with a lot of the things that we do, and our enthusiasm for trying to make a better drum the best we can. And so they got to talking with me, and he sent me over a picture of the Rolling Stones, the lips and tongue.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, let's make a snare. So we used all inlaid wood, and I made this drum, and it was in my office for 2 years. And, Charlie Watts is one of the nicest men you'll ever meet.
Oh, yeah.
And finally they came through town, and he had been playing DW snares. He plays Gretsch drums. But he had been playing a DW snare for, I don't know, a dozen years or so.
Wow.
And never really an endorsee.
Right.
He just loved the sound of that snare. So he said, but I'd like to have I'd like a deeper one. So I had just come back from Europe, and I was jet lagged all to hell, and I grabbed this snare. I go, he usually plays a 5. This one's a 6.5. So I raced down to center staging, and lo and behold, he wasn't feeling good that day. So I set it up with his tech to play this drum, and they looked at it and they said, "Oh my God, nice stickers on the side." And I went, "No, they're not stickers. That's inlaid wood. It's sycamore. It's red poplar. It's black pearwood. It's all these different things to make the images." And so I left it with him. I said, "Give me an email and tell me how he likes it." So lo and behold, a lot of the guys on the crew are old friends of mine. So he emails me back the next day. He says, "If I had a camera at the right moment, here you got Ronnie Wood, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Charlie Watts, Daryl Jones. They're all pointing. And he's got the big Mr. Magoo magnifying glass out, and he's going, "It's real wood now, isn't it?" You know. And so he said they played it
like you would give him a drum with a sticker on it.
Yeah, right. So they played it, and Dave Natal, who was their front of house guy, they recorded it and played it back over the phone to me. And
my gosh!
And they said they loved it. So anyway, Charlie says, "Meet me at Staples Center. Is there a chance we could market this thing?"
Whoa!
And my tail's wagging like a puppy.
Oh my gosh!
So I go down there, and we meet Charlie just right after the sound check, and he says, I really, really love this drum, and I think it'd be a great thing. So my intentions were the proceeds of this would go to a charity that Charlie would pick. The charity needs the royalty. Charlie certainly doesn't need more money in that regard. Mm-hmm. So anyway, he says, great idea, John. This is great. And I said, we'll make 250 of them. How's that? And we'll sell them, and all those proceeds will go that way. Oh, that's a great idea. Just let me get my management involved.
Uh-oh.
Well.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, uh-oh is the right word.
Oh, God,
so
I
about
hate those people.
3-4 months later, I got it from his management, and they said, we'd really like to keep this private for Charlie himself.
Damn it.
Well, so I was kind of crushed, but I went right to 3 guys because the NAMM show was coming, right?
Right.
And I said, and I'd already talked to people about this idea for the Icon snare drums. So I went to my pal, Nick Mason, Pink Floyd, and I said, Nick, I got this idea to do Dark Side of the Moon. He gave me his blessing.
Ooh.
And he says, go for it, Johnny. And he said, my charity will be the Roundhouse in London, the place that used to be an old train switching station, but they converted into a concert venue, and that's where Pink Floyd played their first big gig, is in this place. And underneath it, they have all these rehearsal spaces and instruments that go in them for kind of underprivileged people to go and be able to craft their musical skills. And he says, that's my charity right there. So I got him on board. The next guy I got on board was Roger Taylor from Queen. Nice. And so I developed the Queen crest all the way around with using Padauk and different woods and dyed maple and bird's eye and all this good stuff. Anyway, and his charity was the Freddie Mercury AIDS Foundation. And that was perfect, right? And then I said, I need a third person, and a very dear friend of mine is Neil Peart, and he was doing the Time Machine thing at the time with Rush, and so we made a Time Machine snare drum, and all out of inlaid wood, and it was very intricate, and his charity was Princess Margaret's Cancer Foundation in Toronto, Canada. So this caught on. They all sold very well. I mean, you get a piece of the artist, right? You get something to have. It's a collectible drum. And by the way, it's not just a pretty face. These are rockets for snare drums.
Oh, that's
cool. We did very well with that. Well, then it turned into, I've got to have a new one every year.
Oh, that's so cool.
So after that, I did, I believe it was R40, the last Rush tour, when that was like a beautiful drum with, black pear, red poplar, and all kinds of images in koto wood of their album covers, all the way around the drum. And it was, of course, there are so many Neil fans out there. It sold like that.
Wow.
And then last year I did, another dear, these are all friends of mine, but a really, really beautiful man is Mick Fleetwood. And he's somebody you should have on the show one day. And I thought, well, I want to honor Mick. What would that be? So I got together with my artist here, and we recreated the Rumors album cover with Stevie Nicks, and we used black pear, Padauk, orange-dyed poplar, and white poplar, and koto wood for their skin tones, and we put that all the way around the drum, and that was a great success. Well, this year, I decided I wanted to honor Terry Bozzio. And what's Terry Bozzio's icon? Well, it's the black page.
Oh,
And
wow.
any of you drummers out there
Wow.
know, and maybe some of you live in fear of this piece of music, but it is one of the most difficult drum parts you'll ever be summoned to play, right? And a lot of people, Frank used to witness guys, musicians by the coffee machine.
Are you putting the actual composition on the snare drum?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
these guys used to live in fear that somebody would make this complicated piece of music that had more notes on it than white paper behind it. So that was his idea for the black page.
Wow.
Anyway, so I did the black page and the whole piece goes all the way around the drum.
Oh my God!
And it's done. It's on dyed white bird's eye to look like old parchment paper. And Frank had written the thing in pencil, so I got a hold of that, and the laser engraving looks like pencil. And I did in black dyed pear wood is the black page written before every group of music. And of course I had to include Frank's iconic stash and goatee in black pear as well.
Wow.
And that comes, and Terry Bozzio signs every one on the top. And we include a 7-inch vinyl of the studio version of Terry playing the black page.
Wow.
And then on the sleeve of the vinyl is the handwritten by Frank, the parts for the other musicians to play, and the drum part is on the drum. So that's my latest one in Icon
Amazing.
series.
John, is all of that, is that on the DW website? I actually watched your video at NAMM and saw the whole thing.
You could go to dwdrums.com and you'll see some of these beautiful gems.
Okay.
I'm very, very proud of all that. I had to get clearance, of course, from Terry, which he fell in love with it, but Amit Zappa as well. Amit Zappa has been tremendously helpful from the Zappa Foundation.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Just beautiful. I mean, what a wonderful, I mean, everybody wins.
Yeah, everybody wins here. And by the way, the charity that we take care of with this particular drum is St. Jude's Children's Hospital.
Lovely. Really nice. Yeah.
No one loses.
No
one loses.
No. Everybody wins.
And of course, this year I went to Italy, and because I'd heard from these people who control 18th century Stradivari violins, and they kind of gave me the nod to apply what Antonio Stradivari did in the world of stringed instruments and violins to our drum set. And so what they said, but if you go and you subscribe to the idea of Stradivari Legno is Italian and wood. You have to walk in the steps and take the very measures that Antonio did to get this material from the base of the Dolomite Mountains north of Bolzano, Italy, and that's where you will find Norwegian spruce. And this is the path you got to take. So my wife and I went there and met with my guy in Milan, Renzo Calastri, and he drove us there. And by God, it was an unbelievable trip of a lifetime.
Whoa, when was that?
That was in November. He came, when I called him on the phone, I said, Renzo, I need help terribly with this project. He said, I'll be right there. In 2 days, he was sitting across from my desk in Oxnard, and he's so into it. And he just helped me out tremendously. And when we got to Milan, he says, be there November 1st. And we got there, and he drove us there, and we spent the night in this little cobblestone place, And the next morning, we drove up, all the way up high into the Dolomites. And we got up there, and it was cold, Robin, and the pavement had turned to a dirt road, then to 2 tire tracks.
Oh,
and
wow.
We stopped, and it is silent. It is more silent than you'll ever know silence. And you're looking at a 20,000-foot rock across the valley right there, right in front of your face, and a 1,000-foot waterfall, and you can't hear it. It's so quiet.
Wow.
And what you do And what Antonio did was you take a hammer and you tap these trees. You hit the tree, and these are like dead straight Norwegian spruce that are about 100 feet tall. They're most glorious, majestic trees.
Mm.
And this is in a place called the Val di Fiamme, and they have a group of people that control this area called the Magnificent Community of Val di Fiamme. And they harvest since 900 A.D., and they control the procurement and the protection of this area. So you can only take so much. It's like getting a haircut. It's a necessary thing to do. So we get all the way up there, and I said, Renzo, give me the hammer. And he goes, Giovanni, I forgot the hammer. And I said, Jesus Christ, Renzo, I came a long way from
God.
LA. So he rummages around in the trunk of his car, and he comes out with a tire iron. And I tap on the first tree, and there's nothing there. And I went, oh, my God, it isn't true. He says, no, go to the next one. So I walk up to this other one, beautiful, beautiful tree, and I tap on it, and I go, boom. And I mean it. This glorious, big, tall tree resonated like a marimba bar.
Wow.
And it ricocheted across that forest, and I swear to God, it was the most unbelievable experience of my life. And I said, there is a Santa Claus.
Wow.
Easter Bunny, all those guys are real, because this was fantastic. It wasn't just a story. It was really happening to me. And that's how we got the inside parts of our last drum set we did with this. And it was my 45th anniversary. And the guys in Indiana are putting the inlay in the middle. It's got DW and black pear, F-shaped holes in black pear to honor the violin makers. And it's got a background of Italian gray poplar and blue-dyed koto wood in Roman numerals XLV, which stand for 45. And the outside, we then went to Slovenia to get my Croatian sycamore. And that's how Antonio built his violins. The backs were high-figured Croatian sycamore, and the inside part was Norwegian Stradivari forest spruce. And by God, they are the most glorious drums, and I'm so proud of them. But what a trip. And that whole video, by the way, Ed, is on dwdrums.com. If you go to our web, it's about 35 minutes, everybody, so you have to get out some popcorn and invest a few minutes. It's a great story.
It is a great story, and it's wonderful because you actually went through visually and explained the different kits and what you were just talking about. I was just curious for you, though, so are you like the first guy to ever take the drum, not necessarily manufacture, but this whole acoustic audio thing into consideration when manufacturing drums? Because it sounds to me like, well, I'm 59 now, but back in the day, you'd just go in a store. It was Ludwig Slingerland, and I remember the odd Trixon kit, or there was another. That's how old I am. And I don't know what trees those Trixon drums came out of, but man, the shape of those things. But,
they were something, weren't they?
Oh yeah, single-headed, and just it was just a bizarre shape to them. But
that's why the bass drum looked like it was deflated.
Yeah,
because that's the only way. Back in those days, you could attach two bass drum pedals onto it and play double bass.
Oh, that's what that was for.
That's why that was done like that.
But who was it? I don't know if it was Remo. Who made the drum heads for that bass drum?
Remo did, but yeah. Remo actually made that, and there was an outfit that started. They were German, and it was it was a hard drum head to manufacture, but it was crazy. Back in those days, Ed, you're right. Those were the romantic days of a lot of beautiful drums, and they all had wonderful sounds and such. And I'm just trying to keep that dream alive. I'm doing everything I can.
I got to tell you, but our son has an Exotics DW kit, and the snare drum on that thing, it's just a standard size. It's the 5.5 by 14. I don't know the specifics of the drum. Obviously, if you saw it, you'd see it in a minute. It's got a real simple throw-off, but it just sounds amazing in just about every application. And I always
glad
get, because
that
I
works.
use it while our son's in New York. Dad sneaks the DW snare drum out of the house and uses it on
You're just
gigs.
taking care of it for him, right?
Yeah, it's maintenance. I'm just road testing it. But no, it sounds great, and it's a real elegant drum. And for most of what I end up doing, it's just this sort of the coated ambassador with the black dot underneath. But man, what a versatile drum. But it's just amazing how far all the technology has come and what you've done personally to bring this whole other thing to light about tuning and sound and the necessity of considering when you buy drums that it's not just a visual thing, it's acoustically, and it's really sort of being aware of the sounds and the
physics.
So yeah, because whoever thought of this stuff back in the day? It was always, guys used to buy stuff out of like book catalogs.
Oh
right?
yeah.
So
Where my first kit came from.
Yeah, I think mine was the very first one I ever got was like the Red Tiger Ralston kit, which I think was a Japanese made. It had the rail consulate on it, and I think they may have been plywood drums. I don't even remember, but they didn't sound necessarily great, and certainly the head manufacturer at that time I can't even remember, but the heads lasted a few weeks, but it's all come to this big thing, and oddly enough, at the end of the day, drums are still an acoustic instrument, so all of this stuff that you're talking about is real, necessary for drummers to be aware of, because we don't have the ability to go like a guitar player and just buy a modeling amp or some sort of the various stomp boxes to get sounds that we want in an instant. It's all...
Well, yes, it's not just about what pedal you're pushing on the floor to change the sound. It's a lot more work. And part of my whole quest in life and the crusade I'm on is to make that drummer's life easier and more attainable to see his full or her full potential.
Do you ever think about, just a quick last question, do you ever think about the fate of what it was like to sort of put your finger on that little ad in the Yellow Pages and
It's something. You know what, Robin? Those are things. Those are simple twists of fate. And if I hadn't done that, if I hadn't met Don Lombardi, that fantastic man and one of my very best friends in the world, I don't know what my life would be like. But I did, and I'm happy, and I'm a more whole person for it.
Yeah, life is just a funny thing. And
it sure is.
You could have gone to one of those bigger ads, and instead your life took this turn, and aren't we all happy it did? And I'm certainly sure you're happy it did. And
I am. I absolutely am. It's been a wonderful time talking with you guys.
Yeah, same here, man.
We're so happy that you joined us, John, and I adore you, and thank you so much for tuning in, audience, and for you to be with us today, John, and thank you so much. It's been very educational, and we've really enjoyed having you.
And all you guys should go to dwdrums.com, check out that video that John's talking about, because it really is educational, and it's a great history. And obviously there's a lot more to come, so...
Yeah, you'll have to keep us posted, John, and every once in a while be our guest and let us know all the new stuff that you're working on. Would you please?
I'd be honored to do so.
Thank you.
And Mick Fleetwood, we're looking for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
We'll get Mick out here. He's a great, great man.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Thanks so much, John. Love you madly.
Okay. Love you.